have a question to something you said last summer in Germany. There was this travel teacher meeting, this was number all in Europe Center, and there you said that when you look at our lifestyle, you would recommend that we base our Mahamudra on mindfulness and awareness. Elaborate a little bit, what does it practically mean? I mean, I have some general idea, like it's Karmapa and Cheshin you're talking about it. And let's say if you do practices like it's Karmapa, what does it practically mean to include other practices or put certain emphasis?
Yes, that's right. I think what I was trying to say is that Mahamudra, the practice of Mahamudra, which is very, very important for us, it's a practice, we will never be able to achieve that practice without being able to have, without having our mind being mindful, yes. Without it, there is simply no base to discuss or contemplate or meditate or work with, such as the method of Mahamudra. Yeah. So it's somehow inseparable, you see. So sometimes what happens is that I think, such as when we practice, in this case Mahamudra, yes, it is a great practice, but sometimes it can get to us, meaning that it can somehow overwhelm us, in certain ways, such as maybe becomes really too difficult to understand. Often I think that is the case. Becomes too difficult to understand. Probably in this case particularly, simplifying it often will bring great benefit. So if you understand that being applying Mahamudra means that we have to have great mindfulness, and great awareness, and I think this is in this way doesn't mean that we practice something separate, of course, or something that is from a different path. Basically, we are very much actually focusing on the Mahamudra by actually focusing the most fundamental basis, which is having a great mindfulness, having great mindfulness. Yeah. So then I think what happens is that then the Mahamudra becomes much more easier to understand, much more easier to, not to grasp, but to somehow experience, easier to apply. Then we have solved, I think, a big challenge, which is then we as practitioner, or one can put it as one's life, and then the practice, which is in this case Mahamudra, doesn't become separate. They become, very natural. They blend together, and then to the point that it becomes inseparable.
So that means we shift the emphasis a little bit in our practices? Is that what you suggest? Or?
No, really. Just from time to time, I think it is good to somehow focus on the mindfulness aspect of the Mahamudra. Yeah. And then it simplifies the practice. Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, simply means that what does Mahamudra suggest? Yes. That, how do I say, such as, well, of course we have many terms, such as emptiness, suchness, wisdom, inseparability of the wisdom and the compassion and so on. Well, those are big words. It's very interesting. It's probably if you read a book about it or go to a seminar or go to a lecture about it, maybe during that time of the lecture, maybe or during that time of reading about it, let's say, or contemplating on it, maybe in that moment might have some great experiences. Yeah. But then afterwards, it often, or the moment we close the book, let's say, the moment the lecture is finished, let's say, and then it's somehow you're gone again. You're back into the real world. You know? Yeah. So then it's often quite disappointing, and then one somehow creates bigger gaps, I think, between what we call life and then practice. Yeah. So the mindfulness, I think, how it helps us is that the Mahamudra would be like, let's say, it's focusing on the most essential, the extracts of all the knowledge, let's say, of all the information. But now we need to somehow, in order to somehow bridge the two, yes, the practice and in one's life, I would say that the practice of mindfulness does that. It helps us to bridge that. How? Because by being mindful of one's form, mind, dharma, and so on, constantly from, let's say, way before we begin to open the book, or during the reading moment, or afterwards, after we close the book, when we are walking, eating, talking, everything, constantly we are sort of being mindfulness of it, yes, of every experience. And then I think having that practice then helps us to naturally focus on why do we have to be mindful. Then it links to the practice of Mahamudra, yes, which is that then, oh yes, I'm being mindful, I'm to be mindful so that I do not forget my own nature, my own identity, which is compassion, which is wisdom. And by doing that, I think, constantly, then it really sort of establishes a link between life and the practice. Probably in that way, I think it will be of benefit here. Otherwise, the practice of let's say, going for a retreat or going for a lecture or anything, it's great, but then it becomes, maybe it's not a perfect metaphor, but somehow you gain like a sugar rush, in that moment. And then you are very excited and very inspired, but then afterwards, when the sugar rush goes away, and then, it's quite heavy. Yeah.
Could you please give us now some concrete maybe for inspiration, because it's the goal of pilgrimage and life and everything.
Yes. Well, we cannot cover Mahamudra just like that, in a few sessions. If it were like that, it would be great. But probably the simplest way of saying it is like, probably we have to see it like a journey, You never know what may happen on a journey. Yes? We can plan, we can expect things. We can ask the guide. We can train ourselves for whatever the journey. But there is simply no guarantee, what we will face on the way. So, in that case, what is the most helpful thing? Yes, is to be mindful of who you are, or basically in this case, being mindful. As a practitioner, being mindful of what? Being mindful of who we are. Then I think we can bring in the practice of Mahamudra. Then focusing on, how to say, the beginningless the beginningless nature of the mind, the how to say, ceaseless nature of mind, unborn nature of mind, all of that we can bring in. But first, I think we have to be very, very mindful. Who we are, when I say, is like, not that we have, who we are in terms of, it suggests that we have, the practice suggests that we have to have some sort of a pride, not in a negative way, a pride in a way that we see ourselves as honest, tolerant, kind, decent human being. Yes? Being mindful of that nature, that this is who I am. And focusing on that and being mindful of it constantly doesn't mean that we have to somehow become very, very rigid about how we go about life, and that we have to be constantly be very extremely sensitive. It doesn't mean that, but just meaning that we are constantly mindful, that we are watchful. I would say almost like a cat. But probably be a very good example. They're not frightened, of course. They're not oversensitive. They're doing their business. They're going about their day, but and also very elegantly. Should they walk, or should they run, or should they jump? They're constantly very, very mindful. Something like that.
Regarding practice Mahamudra, how important is Vedic discipline, and which kind of Vedic discipline should hold by Western lay thinkers?
Discipline, you mean? Oh. And particularly for Mahamudra. So that's actually the same. Discipline, I think there is no particular discipline, and I think there's, if you have to simplify, I think in the, I forget which sutra or which text, but it does suggest that there is one sort of like discipline, maybe a general one, but also a very essential one, which is more or less what I said earlier. To cast aside ordinary view of oneself and others, and to be mindful of constantly being mindful of one's own extraordinary identity or nature. Of course, in the text it suggests, such as your enlightened nature, now of course another topic, but we will not go there. Meaning, such as the wisdom aspect that we practice, that whichever method is one's own, or then being inseparable from that attitude of that wisdom aspect. Though those are mentioned. But to simplify things is what I said earlier. To focus on one's good nature, That's it. I think this is a great discipline. And it goes directly into one's heart, and directly goes into something that is, I dare say, tangible, and meaningful, and it's something that we can apply. It's, of course, it brings great inspiration when we say, as we never abandon the attitude of the wisdom aspect. Sounds grand, sounds great, yes, but sounds a little bit, doesn't really touch the heart, Probably that's one. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And would you maybe like to say something about the relationship between the past Karmapas and Bhutan and our village?
Yes.
And also maybe today?
I think our lineage has had actually great, how to say, great bond, I would say, yeah. In the past, I think during the 15th, forget whether the 14th, but definitely 15th, and of course my predecessor, the 16th Karmapa, and of course also in the present times, I think, and how to say, the generosity of their, how to say, I could say, well, as a modern term, hospitality, and at the same time the respect for the practice, for the lineage, is great, I would say. Yeah. I think in that way, I think, like in the most of the Himalayan regions, I think such bond, fortunately, it's very much there. In most of the, how to say, previously connected regions, I would say. Yeah. In this case, not just, well, in this case Bhutan, but let's say also that of Sikkim, the state of Sikkim, as well as then that of Nepal and so on. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Where are you really going when you go into the village?
Sorry?
Where are you really going when you go into the village?
Where are you really going? It's a good question. I guess nowhere. No. It's a strange thing to say, yeah? But I mean, really go nowhere. We're basically exploring one's mind. Maybe it's in a very abstract way of saying it. I mean, there is so much to explore, yes. Yeah. And according to our habits, we would like to confirm and believe and trust that we're going on a, something new, something different, something, in this case, even exotic, let's say, something that is rare, something that was not yet explored. I think when we really sit down and think about it, there isn't really anything that we have not explored. What we do is, I think, we remind ourselves, and that is it. So, as I said, it's kind of abstract, but where we really go is, we go into, I think we delve more into the nature of the mind, I think, more than anything. Yeah. Of course, whatever information we absorb, some we we don't have the time and energy to sort of somehow focus on it, focus on the essence and so on. So they just sort of pass by. Some we do focus, some we forget. But really what we are doing, I think we're trying to explore ourselves. Yeah. Because something different we might discover on a journey. And then strangely we can relate that. It will help us to relate to our daily life. Yeah. That somewhere, some opposite part of the world, such during such time and situation, people like myself have been living in such ways, have been, had developed such tradition, such culture, and such style of science and medicine and so on, and of course livelihood. For what? Not just to survive, of course, but then to somehow to enrich the mind. Yeah, I think probably this is the speciality of, one could say, of the humankind. That this is this such rebirth throughout its history. It was unique because it was not only focusing on survival, but something more than that. Never knew exactly, of course, what. Just like your question, you know. We really don't know where we're going, but it's not about just survival. Yeah.
What is your secret?
Well, maybe oneself. Secret. Yes.
I would like to ask about the
Refuge tree.
Yeah, because I found out when I did this patient, I cannot really concentrate on the sandra aspect. Because in my case, I don't know which sandra should be there. I don't have so much, maybe I don't know, devotion or something to one usually kind of related. Because for me it's something very abstract.
Mm-hmm.
And sandra which surrounds me much more closer, and I receive everything from Lama through this sandra. And I cannot put it on the Turkish stage.
Right. Not necessarily. We have to, right away, we have to develop something special. Maybe over the course of time, by exploring, as I said, exploring more, we can somehow relate what it means, maybe. Maybe what is the meaning of Sangha, maybe over the course of time. We may have read a lot about it, we may have heard a lot about it, but somehow maybe till date there was nothing that we can really relate to what it meant in one's own in one's own life. Yeah. So until then, I mean, of course, there's no real harm in sort of in somehow exploring what it could mean. Yeah. Yes.
Please explain one more time. What does it really mean to take refuge in Lama?
Well, it means everything and nothing, I would say. It's nothing in terms of, in the absolute, there is, let's say that one is inseparable. So therefore, it's sort of effortless, you know. We don't have to have a mind to say, we don't have to initiate a thought to have devotion. Yeah, but then it's sort of effortless. Yeah. Now, in everyday life, then yes, there's everything. Yeah. Starting from how we wake up from the how we would wake from the moment we wake up till we fall asleep. Yeah, there's everything. Yeah. Everything is somehow evolved around it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just heard for the first time this term, the primordial Buddha or the Ati.
Yes.
Ati Buddha. And I don't understand
Yes.
the significance. Maybe
Right.
say a little.
Primordial. How do I go about it? Probably, maybe the challenge or the difficulty is coming when, in understanding what it means, maybe because we are so used to having a beginning. Yeah, that's one. Probably that particular topic probably covers everything, both the confusion and the answer. The confusion would be that the idea of a beginning, I think, suggests, sort of indicates our habit, indicates the nature of a habit, simple as that. Yeah. Meaning that okay, let's leave it at that. And then naturally, when we have a beginning, then we have a middle and an end and everything. Yes, everything in between. Yeah. Then there is the whole life, whole world. Joy, sadness. If you think spiritually, then of course there is life, death, even rebirth, and everything. Mind stream, everything comes from there. It's like an endless well, Now, so therefore, when we have that, when we are used to that sort of orientation or orientation, that kind of view, then probably the term primordial sounds, we will often relate to beginning, Or one could say the very first Buddha, the very first, let's say the very first what? The first life, the very first mind, the very first thought, everything to somehow to that. And the reason why I say that it's sort of indicates one's habit is because it is suggesting that we can, it is suggesting something, well, an object to grasp. Yeah. So, to somehow to understand what it means, in this case, both the term beginning or primordial, is that we simply understand such terms, as an indicator, nothing more. Yeah. There's nothing behind it, There's no there's nothing underneath that is being covered by that usage of term or idea. Just simply plain and simple. It just simply means a beginning, meaning if we can to explain a certain time frame. Chronology, we have to pinpoint a certain sort of very, on a conventional level, on a really relative level, sort of roughly estimated. To somehow all of us can pinpoint our thought on a particular subject. Then we say, this is the beginning. From here it began. But nothing more than that, just an indicator. So I think if you understand that, then I think we can relate more with the idea of primordial wisdom or Buddha or anything to do with this, any term that is put together with this term primordial. Yeah. I haven't really an idea of the term primordial, the definition of it in English. But so far. From the Tibetan, if it's the same, then what I can say is that it does bring a little confusion, but if we can somehow establish this idea that it is just a term, just an indicator, then it makes sense. It's much easier to understand. So does it mean that it's like the first Buddha, or a Buddha that was somehow always there? Nothing really like that.
In Karmapa, I participated in fish release in Hong Kong.
Yes.
It was a great experience. I'm wondering why we don't do the West. Is there a particular reason for it, or is it just never came up?
No, I don't think so. I think probably there was not, maybe circumstances maybe didn't arise, maybe. Yeah. Maybe it was not established, you know. There are certain traditions that I think, such as the life release, such tradition has been there in, like in Tibet, or I think many places here in Asia, yes. Yeah. Circumstances, maybe. Maybe over the course of time it will. Yeah.